Insights report number 1, the first memo that Spatial sends out in the story. I knew that for this track, I needed something that sounded incredibly corporate. So the very first thing I wrote was this corporate track, at least that starts the first half of chapter 5's musical track. This track or motive or whatever you want to call it becomes incredibly important throughout the story and gets used over and over and is presented in different ways as Spatial transforms throughout the story. I have just layered some AI speaking over it.
This is a spatial observational memo,
Which of course has that incredibly corporate feel. For this particular track, I knew I wanted the reader to be able to get through the memo before any of the interesting musical stuff happened in the track. So you have quite a long while where it's just repeating that it is a corporate memo, and then we get this transition that starts. I'm going to play just the whole transition. Things start deforming, other sounds, low hums, things start coming in that you've read about through chapters 1 through 4. Gets more and more distorted. And of course, as this is all happening, if you're watching the video version, the video is also getting more distorted, and new effects are coming in, a lot of waviness and all this kind of stuff. And that's the end of this kind of transitional period, which all sound comes out and you're left with just essentially a motive that also gets used a lot. And this is the motive or sound motive, however you want to think about it, for Corbin himself. And that sounds like this. So there's a couple layers there. There's the electronics beeping, there's the actual vocoder, and those elements do get separated out in different tracks to hint at what's actually happening or to foreshadow things that are about to happen. Then we arrive at this section for the strings, where the strings come in full out. I'm just going to play a little bit of it for you. So this section, admittedly, I think is pretty bizarre. It's pretty out there. Here's what the percussion's doing. And these sounds are taken from my version of the database. If you saw the commercials when I was doing all the marketing leading up to the release of We Are Connected, you may have found a commercial called The Database, wherein the story is a fictional sample library that's created. And I wanted to create a small version of that for myself so that for specific tracks that told the story of Spatial or the database, I could pull from a literal database of different beats, chord progressions, things like that I created. And this whole round of sounds and percussion and beats and stuff are all taken from that the real database mini version that I created. And underneath that, you have this string part, these string parts that are really, they're pretty bizarre, especially how they work with the bass line. That sounds like this. Take out the bass. And the idea with this figure in the strings is that with each memo that comes back, it gets more and more transformed. So the first one is the most odd, you might say, and as each of the different memos comes out, this is going to be transformed, and I'm not going to say how. You'll have to check it out, tune in and check it out if you want to hear that. So this track, unlike some of the story tracks, was tricky because all that's there in terms of the reading of the text is this little memo that definitely does read like some of a corporate memo. Yet I wanted to tell the story of the psychological or the looking at what's really happening in someone who's experiencing it as they get the memo and they hear about this. I wanted to capture that in the music. So I ended up taking this odd shape of a lot of corporate sounding, transition, and then full on strings with this percussion that are taken from the real mini version of the database that I built. So all in all, a somewhat bizarre track to match a somewhat bizarre text chapter with the memo coming from Spatial. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you next time.